I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us. One of my favorite parts of the Teaching, Learning, Coaching Conference is the Don Deshler Leadership Award. The Don Deshler Leadership Award is something I created to honor my friend, my mentor, my boss, my advisor, Don Deshler. Don was the director of the Center for Research on Learning for decades. He inspired me as a teacher and as a researcher. He taught me a lot about how to be an educational researcher. He taught me more about how to be a good person. And I honestly think, aside from my wife, he's probably the person who's had the most positive influence on my life. And we created this award to honor people like Don, people whose influence on me was so great that I wouldn't be who I am doing what I do if it wasn't for those people. And in 2024, the award winners were Art, Costa, and Bob Garmston, who have had a profound impact, not just on me, but on tens of thousands of educators and coaches around the world. If you're a coach, or if you work with coaches, probably what you're doing wouldn't be going the way it's going now if it had not been for Art and Bob, who paved the way for coaches around the world. And they've worked in every continent except Antarctica, and everywhere I go, I meet people influenced by these two people who are brilliant. Art brings the cognitive part, Bob brings the coaching part. And I learned that in our conversation when we went to Sacramento to meet Art and Bob, give them the award. We sat down, we had one of the best conversations I've had in years. I loved hearing about how the ideas developed, how they work together, how they collaborated, what they disagree on, what they agree on. This podcast is going to give you a little bit of the flavor of the conversation when we met to talk about the Don Deshler Leadership Award and my honor of awarding Art Costa and Bob Garmston. So, Art and Bob, why don't you tell us who you are for those 2 or 3 people out there who may not know who you are?
Hi, I'm Bob Garmston, being interviewed along with my colleague Art Costa.
And I'm Art Costa, being interviewed with my colleague Bob Garmston.
You copied me, didn't you? I love it. Sorry. I have a weird sense of humor. I began in education, teaching in a rural school. I have 42 fifth graders, and I had a principal at that school, Howard Keel, I think his name was, that was very, very clever, very influential. He was a person that didn't tell you what to do or show you what to do. An example is that we were having a conversation in the faculty room one day, and he says, "You know, Bob, you're working in a very conservative community. A lot of these people are, and they expect someone of authority to wear a tie. Now, I'm not suggesting to you in any way that you do that, but you could give that some thought."
And I have been pursuing a career in education for many, many, many years. I have my master's and my doctorate from University of California in Berkeley. I have worked with schools around the world, and I hope that as a result of my efforts, I've gotten them to be a little bit more thoughtful, and teachers a more compassionate person as they deal with kids. I have great faith in the future based on the students that I see today who are curious, who are insightful, and who are and are more humane than I have ever seen before. I think that there's a feeling of kindness that is sweeping our next generation, and that's very reassuring to me that maybe we played some role in building that generation of thoughtfulness and kindness.
So the first question is, what are your hopes and fears for education in the future?
One of the ways we're talking about it is that I hope it survives as a public entity that is supported fiscally, politically, and that school faculties collaboratively develop more agency, more efficacy, more decision making. Right now, the whole thing is pretty top down, and we know enough about collective efficacy. We know that when that is generated, we get really sound results for kids and others. Right?
I would agree with that, and I would hope that we could make a deeper and stronger impact through education on developing thinking individuals. The mind is worth attending to in schools. So teaching kids to think, not how to think, and not what to think, but what are the processes that you go through to make decisions, that we learn to communicate to students in cognitive ways. I would like to hear more cognitive language in schools, such as comparing and contrasting and inferring. I think the instruction should focus more on metacognition, not only what you think, but how you think, and making sure that you're self-monitoring as well as conscious of the ways you can go about improving yourself, so that kids grow up with a deeper locus of control within themselves, that I know how to think, I know how to think well, and I know how to deal with controversy, so that kids become more powerful thinkers as a result of education.
What I realize, Art, as you say that, what comes to mind is that the goals for education, the broad goals for education, have been set a couple of times. Way back somewhere in 1800s,
Yep.
Goals were to train kids so they could be obedient factory workers, as we're stating it. Then emphasis has shifted from time to time over the decades. And what I hear you saying is that it's time for a brand new total reassessment of the role of schools. And that role ought to focus on things that empower students and increase their capability to achieve what they want to achieve.
My hopes are that through education, we can create a more thoughtful, loving, and peaceful world. And that through the work of wonderful teachers who meet with kids daily, they can carry this message to the students who will be the citizens of the future. So I have great hope in the future for my own kids and for all children, that the world is indeed a more peaceful and loving place.
I have a fear that's political and a hope that's not. The political part is that there are many forces in the country that want to move us away from public schools and to private schools. And I believe that part of that motivation, in many quarters, part of that motivation is so that those schools can tell kids what to think, rather than the public school system, which is attempting to broaden people's thinking and help them be critical. So that's a fear that I have. It's an external force on education. A hope that I have is that two major issues could be resolved. The first is student attention span. What we're learning is that, as one author put it, they have the attention span of a goldfish. And you'll see that all around you. You see it in classrooms, of course. And the dominant thing that's pulling them away is social media, and I guess the TV and things like that. But that lack of ability to attend, and this is true for adults too, we are losing our capacity for sustained attention. I think that's a very, very serious deficit, and I'd like to find some ways that we can modify and change the direction of that. The other hope is that we can do something that helps schools be more balanced, healthier places. And in particular, I'm thinking about the damage that kids come to schools with in their heads. And that damage is often attributed to social media. I don't know that it's all there. But we see kids more depressed, more self-critical, more alone than we have in the past. And that many of those cases lead to suicide. That's a deep, deep stain on us, and is a societal stain in many ways. I've heard that there are entire school systems, I think Seattle might be one of them, that have passed some legislation or rules in their area that limit social media companies from doing X, Y, Z. And that we desperately need legislation heading that direction. One theory I've heard is that the social media people know that a clampdown is coming. So they want to make as much money as possible and this kind of thing. So hopes and fears.
So my second question is to take you out of your cognitive thinking framework and ask you about advice. So I know neither one of you is advice givers, but what advice would you give to educators, including administrators, teachers, coaches, counselors, all people in education? What advice would you give to educators?
A heck of a question. I'll have Art talk so I can copy what he says.
Well, I think we need to pay more attention, as you probably already heard us say, pay more attention to what's going on inside kids' heads when they learn. So understanding more and more about how the brain works, and as you well know, we've made tremendous strides in understanding our brains and the relation and our relationship to studying and learning and communicating with others. So those are the tools that we use daily, and we need to spend more time focusing on those tools of communication, tools of thinking, tools of interacting with others, because our focus on content alone has changed over the years. Instead of looking at encyclopedias today, we look at artificial intelligence. So the world's knowledge is already at our fingertips. What we need is to teach how we make sense out of all of that How do we think about it? How do we incorporate it into our meaning and our life? So I'd like to have teachers spend more time on what goes on in your head when you're learning, what goes on in your head when you're thinking, and what goes on in your head when you're having emotions, both positive and negative. So the kids are more thoughtful and self-directing in their thoughtfulness.
I'm glad you added emotion at the end. When Art talks about cognition and a cognitive focus, he is not excluding emotion.
No.
Because emotion is part of those complex processes. And I'm just going through my experiences with students, and there are such strong emotional needs sometimes that they are off-putting for the teacher, and that teachers in general can be supported in managing their emotions. And I'll mention one tiny example is about going to the balcony when one's in a conversation and you're upset. If you go to the balcony and look at yourself and the other person, you still have the feelings, but they do not direct you. Now you're free from that, and you can manage to say what's appropriate to say in a reasonable way. So that's one of a billion things that we could learn.
Yeah, I think in recent educational circles, we have separated out the actions, the emotions, and the cognition, the thinking that goes on inside our heads. And I think that's somewhat of a false dichotomy. You can't separate them. There is no thinking without emotion. There's no action without thinking. And so the three of us, the actions that we take, the emotions that we feel, and the thinking that goes on in our heads are all interrelated. So we have to look at that as a triad, more than one or the other. Not that one of the, well, I think that we're finding out more and more that our actions and our cognition and our emotions are entwined with each other.
What comes to mind as you say that is the question of what is it that would bring communities along, families along, to be able to support such a radical idea? I'm serious about calling it radical. So we know that support from the community or negative pressure from the community impacts what people do or what teachers do and think.
Well, one piece of advice would be to become continuous learners among continuous learners, so that your modeling as a learner you create a model for others to follow. And so whether it be through professional development, advanced courses, reading, coaching, whatever means that you demonstrate your desire to be a continuous learner, and others will follow that model, I hope.
Oh, and listen how it's going to come out. Well, the piece of advice that I might give is never give up. It is the quality of resilience that helps many children grow to a productive childhood. It is that resilience and agency that schools, that teachers need to be able to free themselves, and this just has to be a collective thing, free themselves from ancient curriculum spans. Here's science, here's social studies, here's mathematics, here's English and language, and begin to focus partially on that, but also just as much on the development of efficacy and the development of agency. And so that, in fact, is Art and I are working with a group from around the country that we call Project Efficacy. And we're exploring just what might need to happen for those to become foci for education.
What can you say about the impacts your colleague has had on you? Art, how has Bob had an impact on you? Bob, how has Art had an impact on you?
I think the greatest impact that Bob has had on me is in continuous learning. He is a continuous learner, and I think that's rubbed off somewhat on me. I find that I just understand one of his new ideas, and all of a sudden he's coming up with another one. So he keeps me hopping, and it's been a wonderful growth relationship that we've had over the years. So I've appreciated that greatly.
For me, I know that I'm a much better person, well-rounded person from knowing and working with Art. He comes embodying the states of mind, states of mind, which are all very, very positive qualities and qualities that would be nice for us all to aspire to. I am more random. I'm more impressionable. I'm more fun. Start it. So I'm not as you want to use the word well contained. I don't know where it is. I'm not. I think I'm not as mature as her, and so that's what I get from him.
One, he has expanded my curiosity. He has built on humor. He has been a continuous learner as a model for me, and so together we are co-learners in many different ways. I think Bob has and contributed to my, I guess I would call it my ability to bounce back. Both of us have gone through periods of extreme frustration and disappointment, as well as success, and how to learn from both the successes and the disappointments and become better people is something that Bob has taught me, or at least has been a co-confidant in that process. I'm deeply indebted to him for his friendship and his knowledge and his persistence.
It's hard to think of the right phrase to open it. Knowing Art has totally been life-changing. His impact in part on me is the joy of being able to work with someone who's curious and who's pursuing intellectual things. Art models carefully or consistently his gratitude, his concern, his love, his skill. One of the things that Art does that I'm envious of is that he can talk in whole paragraphs. For me, it comes out a little different. I think to some, Art is an unusual figure in any setting or any era. And that I'm very fortunate to be this close to him and to be able to learn from him and to laugh with him.
What do you think's been the secret to your 40-year collaboration? You work together. You said you talk to each other every other day, pretty much on the phone. You see each other every week. 4 decades. You're beating most marriages. So, what's the secret to that collaboration?
Well, I'm sure that part of it is the mutual learning that takes place with us. One area is about emotional balance. And Art has much more emotional balance than I do. And an example of that, an example of what I can learn to do with Art is the two of us were having a meeting with two other colleagues a year or so ago. We had a 2-day meeting. We're sitting in a place like this. And on reflection, I realized that I was being a jerk. And I wasn't paying attention, and I was making jokes, and I was challenging inappropriately. And on the way home that night, I thought, oh my God, who do I want to be? The question, who do I want to be, is lovely. Well, I want to be a learner. So what's a learner do? Well, they listen, they pay attention, et cetera, et cetera. So that's because of Art's groundedness and because of what we collectively know about emotion and cognition, that's been a great service to me.
I think Bob has helped me learn so many new ways. For example, I never even heard of rapport. Didn't know what it was, but Bob introduced me to that. And that opened up a whole new realm of consciousness for me. And that's just one example. I think another thing Bob did for me was to enhance my understanding of body language and what that means and how it should be interpreted. I never knew that before. And so he has been a source of great learning and benefit to me in that way.
He also likes me.
Well, it seems like you don't take each other too seriously.
No,
There's this mutual respect, but there's a lot of joy there.
right.
Well, I want to say something about that. Right now, we are. Now, this is copyrighted with us, so don't steal it. We are working on a little project called Project Efficacy. And we feel very strongly that the coaching process is way too cognitive. Now, that sounds a little bit funny.
Whoa. I haven't heard that before.
But how do you bring a little bit of levity, a little bit of humor into the coaching process? And we are contemplating having the many coaches that we have trained or have influenced to bring in some humor. What's the most humorous coaching experience you've ever had? And we're even developing a kind of a laugh meter to see which is the funniest and recognizing that and building a corner in the coaching process for having some fun. It's not all that serious. And so it's not only that it's not serious, but it's also a way of building trust. When you can laugh, when you can have people laugh at you and with you, that's a trust-building experience. And so I think that the increase in humor in the coaching process is a valid territory to explore and to expand.
And I just had an unusual insight with that. I don't think we should be calling it coaching. I think we should call it being together. Because what both Art and I observe with people that are skilled coaches is that they're having a conversation with one another, and informally, they are using the skills of inquiry and intrigue and what have you. I think of Laura Lipton, for example.
Yep.
Hard to have conversation without Laura, without her. Oh, why is that important to you? You know, so I say that facetiously, but actually, what we call coaching as a way of being with others, I think is a nice concept.
Yes, I agree.
It was really my sincere honor to be able to come and give you the Don Deshler Leadership Award. Don profoundly influenced my life, just like you profoundly influenced my life. I'm wondering what went through your mind when you heard that you've been recognized in this way.
Well, I was deeply moved and deeply honored for a couple of reasons. One is that I hold Jim in very high esteem, and for him to pick me or us or me as a awardee, as a person deserving that award, that's just a compliment in itself, even without the plaque. So I'm deeply indebted to Jim for not only the award, but also I've quoted him and referred to him and read his articles and his columns whenever possible. And so I've held him in high admiration for a long time. And so to have this award awarded by Jim was beyond the award, but honored because of Jim and through him.
My initial reaction, it was severalfold. What is this? Didn't understand any part of the richness that Jim shared with us today about the origin and background. And always a question that runs through my mind. If he's asking for a presentation or something, what do I have to say that's of value to anyone? And third, feeling honored, special, yeah.
That is a great concept. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah.
Well, yes, I've added a new repertoire to my coaching pattern. It's anything else you'd like to add? What else? Yes, I would like to share. Another hope for education is that we find a way of focusing on the children that are in dire circumstances, not to save them, but to help them develop the resilience that they need to be able to perform and get on with life. And to me, that's a critical value. And Tim, would you think it served me? Okay.
Well, first of all, I want you to know, Jim, how deeply honored and appreciative I am of being recognized. I guess down deep inside, all of us have a certain degree of pride, and it's nice to be recognized. It's nice when people just say thank you. But when they give you an award, that's super nice. And so I'm very appreciative of the recognition that you're giving to me and to Bob for the work we've done. at my age, it's gratifying to know that I have contributed in some way to a better world, a more thoughtful world, and a world where people can get along by listening to each other and understanding each other rather than by fighting each other. So that's been a gift, and I appreciate your recognition of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you guys so much.